You're lying in bed. The room is dark and quiet. There is nothing that needs to be solved right now. No urgent message waiting for a reply. No deadline that can't wait until tomorrow. The day is over, and yet, a part of you isn't finished with it. It's somewhere else, not in specific thoughts that you can identify and name, but in a kind of diffuse attention that keeps operating in the dark, monitoring, assessing, waiting for something you can't quite define. This state is not insomnia in the clinical sense of the word. It's not anxiety about concrete problems. It's something older and deeper than that. It's a system that was built never to fully switch off during the night, and it is performing exactly the function it was designed to perform. There is a thought experiment that helps explain where this comes from. Imagine that you are living 200,000 years ago, not in a house with walls, locks, and alarm systems, out in the open, with a group of people around you. Night has fallen. The fire has been lit, and everyone needs to rest in order to have enough energy for the next day. But here is the problem that no human being in the past could afford to ignore. Sleeping deeply in an open environment, surrounded by predators, was potentially fatal. Relaxed muscles do not respond quickly enough. Sensory awareness during deep sleep drops dramatically. Reaction time to a threat increases in ways that can mean the difference between survival and death. So what did the group do? No one slept completely at the same time. There was always someone in a lighter state of sleep, with attention partially directed toward the environment, ready to react to the smallest sign of danger, a sentinel. And the most fascinating detail is that this role was not necessarily assigned. It was distributed by the nervous systems of the individuals themselves. Some members of the group naturally had nervous systems that were more inclined to maintain active monitoring during the night. They were the ones who woke up faster, the ones awakened by the slightest sound, the ones who spent more time at the edges of sleep than in its depths, not because there was something wrong with them, because there was something extraordinarily functional about them in that environment. Researcher Jerome Siegel from the University of California spent years studying human groups that still live under conditions similar to those of our ancestors, populations such as the Hadza of Tanzania and the San of Namibia. What he found confirmed something evolutionary theory had already suggested. These groups rarely slept all at the same time. There was always a proportion of individuals in lighter stages of sleep, with higher levels of brain activity in regions responsible for monitoring the environment. And the rotation between deep sleep and lighter sleep occurred in a way that provided continuous coverage throughout the night. The Sentinel Hypothesis is the name Siegel gave to this pattern, and it has a profound implication for anyone who wakes up feeling as though they never truly rested. You may not have insomnia in the clinical sense. You may be carrying out an evolutionary role. Your nervous system may have learned at some point in your life that you are the sentinel, not of the ancestral group, but of the situation it perceived as continuously dangerous, of the responsibility that never seemed safe to place in someone else's hands, of the environment that repeatedly taught you that relaxing came with consequences. And sentinels do not sleep deeply, not because they are weak, not because they are doing something wrong, because they were trained by the environment, by experience, by repetition, to maintain a minimum level of activation throughout the night, to never completely abandon their post, even when there is nothing to watch, especially when there is nothing to watch, because the absence of visible danger was never sufficient proof that danger did not exist, only proof that it had not appeared yet. And a system calibrated for survival will always prefer 1,000 false alarms over a single moment of lowered guard when a real threat arrives. Think about how this shows up in modern life. You worked in a high-pressure environment for months or years, or went through a family situation that demanded constant presence and ongoing attention, or lived through circumstances where unexpected events happened often enough that your system learned that unpredictability is the norm. In those contexts, nighttime vigilance was not dysfunction. It was precise adaptation. It was the system doing exactly what it needed to do so that you could function the next day. The problem is not the adaptation itself. The problem is that nervous system adaptations do not automatically disappear when the context changes. The system learned that nighttime is the moment of greatest vulnerability, that lowering your guard at night is the riskiest move available, and it continues to operate according to that lesson. Even if the context has changed completely, even if the room is safe, even if there is no real threat waiting outside, the system does not know that. Not because it is irrational, because it has not received enough evidence that the rules have changed. And without that evidence, the Sentinel remains at its post, night after night, using energy, preventing recovery, building a deficit that accumulates invisibly until the body simply can no longer function with the same efficiency it once had. To understand what nighttime vigilance costs the body, we need to step inside the architecture of sleep in a way most people have never considered. Sleep is not a uniform state of unconsciousness. It is a structured process organized into cycles that last approximately 90 minutes. And within each cycle, there is a sequence of stages that must occur in order and with sufficient depth for the body's restorative functions to be completed. The most critical stage of all occurs during the first 90 to 120 minutes after falling asleep. It is called first cycle slow wave sleep, or entry delta sleep. During this stage, brain waves reach the slowest frequencies in the entire spectrum, between 0.5 and 2 Hz, and the body simultaneously performs several processes that cannot happen at any other time. The glymphatic system, discovered in 2013 by neuroscientist Maiken Nedergaard, activates and begins removing metabolic waste products that accumulated during the day's neural activity. Among these waste products are proteins whose gradual accumulation has been associated with long-term cognitive decline. The pituitary gland releases between 60 and 70% of the body's daily supply of growth hormone, not only for physical growth, but for tissue repair, immune regulation, and the restoration of metabolic functions throughout the body. The immune system carries out its most intensive maintenance processes, including the production of anti-inflammatory cytokines that regulate the following day's immune response, and the autonomic nervous system makes its deepest transition into parasympathetic dominance, the recovery state, that occurs anywhere within the 24-hour cycle. For all of this to happen, a very specific physiological condition must be met. Levels of norepinephrine in the brain, produced by the locus coeruleus, the primitive vigilance center located in the brainstem, must fall below an extremely low threshold, not merely decrease, almost cease. It is as if the main engine of the alarm system must be shut down before the maintenance crew can enter and begin its work. In a regulated nervous system, this happens naturally during the first minutes after falling asleep. The locus coeruleus reduces its activity, norepinephrine drops, delta sleep deepens, and the recovery processes begin. But in a nervous system with chronic vigilance still activated, in a system that has learned that nighttime is when risk is greatest, the locus coeruleus does not become completely silent. It maintains a residual production of norepinephrine, enough to prevent delta sleep from reaching the depth it requires, enough to create what researchers call subclinical sleep fragmentation. Not fully waking up, but never descending deeply enough for recovery to be completed. Imagine the following household scenario. You decide to clean your entire apartment in one evening. You start with the bedroom. You take everything out of the closet, organize it, put everything back in place. You are almost finished when someone lightly knocks on the door. You go check. It was only the wind. You return to the bedroom. You begin again where you left off. Almost finished once more. Another sound, another distraction, another restart. By the end of the night, you spent hours in the room, but you never actually finished organizing it. That is exactly what happens to delta sleep in a system operating under nighttime vigilance. Every micro-awakening, every residual activation of the locus coeruleus interrupts the recovery process before it can be completed. And the process has to start over from the beginning. But there is another mechanism operating in parallel that explains why nighttime vigilance creates a pattern even more specific than simply sleeping lightly. It is called asymmetric hemispheric environmental monitoring. During vigilant sleep, the brain does not sleep symmetrically across both hemispheres. The hemisphere responsible for spatial processing and the detection of environmental changes, typically the right hemisphere, maintains significantly higher activity than the left. In neuroimaging studies conducted by researchers at Brown University, when participants slept in a new environment or one perceived as unsafe, there was a clear asymmetry in slow-wave activity between the two hemispheres. The more active hemisphere continued processing environmental sounds even during sleep, and it was far more sensitive to irregular sounds, sounds that did not follow a predictable pattern. What does this mean in practical terms? The car that passes regularly on the street does not wake you. The bird that sings every morning at the same time does not wake you. But the neighbor who coughs unexpectedly once at 2 in the morning wakes you. The system is not reacting to volume. It is reacting to unpredictability, to what is not part of the pattern, to what could signal danger. And for someone whose nervous system is in a state of chronic vigilance, the threshold for what counts as unpredictable is much lower. Far more stimuli activate the monitoring hemisphere. Far more sounds cross the threshold from safe to ignore into needs to be evaluated. This creates the experience many people describe as sleeping lightly, always remaining at the edge of sleep, feeling as though they heard everything that happened during the night despite sleeping for enough hours. It is not imagination. It is the vigilance hemisphere doing exactly what it was trained to do, monitoring, evaluating, keeping the sentinel active even while the body is lying down and the eyes are closed. If this video is speaking to something you recognize, if you are seeing your own nighttime pattern reflected in these words, this channel has more. Each video builds on the last. Subscribe so the next one is already waiting for you. But there is something even more specific about the cost of nighttime vigilance that goes beyond physical fatigue. Something that happens at the emotional level, in the processing of the day's experiences. And it explains why some people wake up feeling as though they are carrying more than they should. Not just tiredness, but an emotional weight that sleep should have relieved, yet somehow did not. There is a function of sleep that goes far beyond physical recovery. A function that most people have never considered, not because it is obscure, but because it is rarely explained with the depth it deserves. During REM sleep, which occurs primarily in the final hours of the night, in the cycles that follow midnight and extend until waking, the brain performs a process that has no equivalent in any waking state. It is called the emotional decoupling of memory. During REM sleep, the hippocampus, the structure central to memory formation and consolidation, reactivates representations of the day's experiences. But here is what makes this process unique. It does so within a biochemical environment radically different from the one present during wakefulness. Levels of norepinephrine during REM sleep drop to the lowest levels of the entire sleep cycle, almost zero. What this means is that the brain can revisit emotionally intense experiences, conflicts, worries, fears, uncertainties, without the presence of the hormones that would normally amplify the emotional response to those experiences. It is as if the brain gains access to the emotional archive of the day, but with the alarm system temporarily switched off. And every time an emotionally charged memory is reprocessed in this way, the emotional intensity associated with it decreases a little. It does not disappear, but it loses part of the charge it carried when it was first formed. Over time, night after night of adequate REM sleep, events that were once distressing gradually lose their intensity. The difficult conversation from last week no longer feels as heavy as it did in the moment. The uncertain situation that once triggered intense anxiety is progressively processed until it can be thought about without the same physical reaction. Grief, over the course of months, becomes more bearable, not because the loss changed, but because REM sleep has been reducing the emotional charge of the memories associated with it, night after night. This is what Matthew Walker, neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley, and author of extensive sleep research, calls overnight therapy. REM sleep as the only context in which the nervous system can process emotionally difficult material without the cost of reactivating the stress response. But in a system with chronic nighttime vigilance, REM sleep is systematically compromised for two reasons that reinforce one another. First, elevated norepinephrine prevents REM sleep from reaching the depth and duration it requires. The same residual levels that fragment delta sleep also fragment REM sleep. Second, the timing of REM sleep throughout the night means that it is especially vulnerable to disruptions during the final hours before waking. Waking up just 1 hour earlier than necessary does not simply eliminate 1 hour of sleep. It disproportionately eliminates REM sleep. The final 90-minute cycle, the one containing the highest proportion of REM sleep of the entire night, is lost completely, and with it, the emotional processing that should have taken place. The result is what researchers call cumulative REM sleep debt. The emotionally charged memories of the day retain their original intensity. The difficult experiences of the week have not been discharged. The system wakes up carrying the same emotional load it had when it went to bed, added to whatever the new day is about to bring. This explains something very specific that people living in chronic vigilance often describe. The feeling that small things carry a disproportionate weight. That a slightly ambiguous email can ruin an entire morning. That a conversation that did not go as expected remains active in the mind for hours after it ended. That the ability to regain perspective after setbacks has been reduced. This is not emotional hypersensitivity. It is an accumulation of processing that never happened. It is the emotional system operating with reservoirs that were never emptied because the mechanism responsible for emptying them, REM sleep in a low norepinephrine environment, was busy keeping the sentinel at its post. There is a third level at which nighttime vigilance leaves its mark. It is called threat memory consolidation. When REM sleep is chronically insufficient, memories categorized by the system as potentially dangerous do not undergo the process of emotional unloading. But there is something even more specific. These memories are reconsolidated, strengthened, with their original intensity fully intact. Like files that were supposed to be compressed and archived, but instead returned to the operating system at full size, with priority access, with more sensitive activation triggers. The practical result is a system that, over time, becomes progressively more reactive to stimuli related to threats that were never processed. The same ambiguity that would have been manageable yesterday now triggers a stronger response. The same type of interaction that would have been tolerable last week now feels unbearable. Not because the situation became worse, but because unprocessed threat memories are more available, more sensitive, and easier to activate. And here is the complete cycle as it closes on itself. Nighttime vigilance compromises REM sleep. Compromised REM sleep accumulates unprocessed threat memories. Unprocessed threat memories increase the sensitivity of the alarm system. Increased sensitivity elevates nighttime vigilance. It is a self-sustaining pattern, one that strengthens over time, and one that does not respond to the number of hours slept. It responds to something far more specific, something that involves what the nervous system needs to perceive before it is willing to let the sentinel finally rest. There is something most approaches to improving sleep completely overlook. They treat sleep as a problem of external behavior. No screens before bed, a cooler bedroom, consistent sleep schedules, less caffeine, and there is truth in all of those recommendations. But they do not touch the central mechanism. Because the problem is not the external behavior. It is the internal state of the system that is going to sleep. More specifically, the sense of safety that the autonomic nervous system either has or does not have at the moment the body lies down. And for the autonomic nervous system, a sense of safety is not a cognitive conclusion. It is not the decision that everything is okay. It is not the thought that there is no danger. It is a very specific collection of physiological signals that the nervous system evolved to recognize as evidence that vigilance can be reduced. The first signal is body temperature. The transition into deep sleep requires the body's core temperature to drop by approximately 0.5 to 1 degree Celsius. This drop happens naturally when the environment is slightly cooler than the temperature associated with comfort and wakefulness. The nervous system recognizes this cooling as a circadian signal, as evidence that the waking cycle has been completed and that the recovery period is beginning. In an environment that is too warm, or in a system whose sympathetic activation maintains peripheral vasoconstriction, this cooling does not occur properly, and deep sleep never fully establishes itself. The second signal is heart rate variability. When the parasympathetic system takes over during sleep, the heartbeat becomes slightly irregular, with subtle variations between beats that indicate the cardiovascular system is responding flexibly and adaptively. Paradoxically, this controlled irregularity is a sign of health. It is the opposite of the rigidity that accompanies stress and vigilance. In a system living with chronic vigilance, heart rate variability is reduced, the rhythm becomes more rigid, and the nervous system, detecting that rigidity as evidence that sympathetic activation still dominates, maintains its state of alertness. The third signal is breathing. Slow diaphragmatic breathing, with longer exhalations than inhalations, activates the vagus nerve and induces a parasympathetic response, not because it is a relaxation technique, but because it is the natural breathing pattern of an organism at rest. The nervous system recognizes this pattern as evidence that wakefulness has ended. By contrast, shallow chest breathing, the breathing pattern of alertness, signals to the system that there is still demand requiring attention. There is a fourth signal that is rarely discussed, yet is especially powerful: social co-regulation. In environments where trusted human beings are present, familiar voices, recognizable scents, audible breathing rhythms, the nervous system activates social neuroception circuits that significantly reduce nighttime vigilance. This is not merely emotional comfort, it is biology. The nervous system evolved to recognize the presence of allies as one of the strongest indicators that it is safe to reduce environmental monitoring. The sentinel rests more easily when it knows it is not alone in the field. This explains why many people sleep better beside someone they trust, not simply because another person is present, but because the nervous system co-regulation that occurs through subtle sensory signals, breathing rhythm, body temperature, movement, communicates to the system that vigilance can be shared, that it does not have to be total, that the sentinel can rest without completely abandoning its post. Now, to connect everything explored in this video, here is the conceptual map of what we have learned. The Sentinel Hypothesis reveals that nighttime vigilance is not a dysfunction. It is a precise evolutionary function that some nervous systems have learned to activate chronically in response to environments of sustained demand or continuously perceived threat. First cycle slow-wave sleep is the most critical recovery window of the night, and it is exactly where the elevated norepinephrine of a vigilant nervous system prevents the deepest restoration from taking place. Without that complete window, glymphatic clearance, hormonal release, and immune restoration become compromised. Asymmetric hemispheric monitoring explains the feeling of having slept lightly all night. The monitoring hemisphere remains partially active, creating micro-awakenings that fragment sleep cycles before they can fully complete, even when the person remains unaware of them. REM sleep and the emotional decoupling of memory reveal that nighttime is the only context in which the brain can process difficult experiences without interference from stress hormones. When that process does not occur, threat-related memories retain their original emotional intensity. Threat memory consolidation shows that the problem is not merely fatigue. It is the progressive accumulation of unprocessed emotional material that gradually makes the system more reactive. And physiological safety perception reveals that the nervous system does not learn it can rest through decisions or arguments. It learns through repeated bodily signals that it recognizes as evidence that the environment is safe enough for the sentinel to stand down. The sentinel does not need to be forced to rest. It needs permission that the nervous system itself can recognize. In a language older than words, if something in this video reached you differently, if you recognize the pattern of your own inner sentinel, share it in the comments. A word, an insight, whatever stayed with you. Because naming what the system does at night is already the beginning of creating the distance that precedes real change. But there is still something about this vigilance pattern that has not yet been explored. What happens when the system learns that threat can come from anywhere? Not only at night, not only in situations that are obviously dangerous, but from any stimulus in the surrounding environment. Why does the brain treat completely neutral signals as potentially threatening? Why can a text message, a slightly ambiguous facial expression, or a silence that lasts 1 second longer than expected activate the very same system that responds to genuine danger? And what does that reveal about the cost of living in an environment where the threat system has never truly been given permission to rest?